Hello, Tom. Our next question today is from Carmel. I'd like to pick your brains on MBT knowledge. I'm trying to integrate the concepts of high entropy society and the use of force to decrease entropy. This is a very interesting concept. Basically, Tom was saying that we can defend ourselves if the only low entropy choice is violence. I'm struggling with the concept of fighting back by killing to save your life, since you can get back into another avatar. However, why should they allow gangs to kick them out of the game? Tom always says the intent is what is important here. So if the intent is to serve others, to save lives for the good of the community, fighting back, killing the gangs should be an acceptable choice. A low entropy choice? But in our culture, we believe in paying karmic debts when you kill, no matter why you kill. What is the MBT views on that? By taking out a high entropy being who is hurting and killing innocent people, will you de-evolve and become high entropy? How would you answer
Okay,
that,
well,
Tom?
that was the question. Well, doing something violent, then raise your own entropy. If the answer is yes, then it's probably not a good thing to, to be involved in that violence. But what I'm talking about is something that where in very unusual and rare circumstances, to stand up for yourself, to defend yourself, is the right thing to do. And even if that takes violence, we could probably have a discussion that would never end on, what these things might be. But I think everybody would agree on the ones that were most obvious. And then there's probably some that are the least obvious that we could argue about forever and never come to a consensus on. But the idea here is that if you see a negative person, a high entry person, and he's beating up a bunch of children. He's 12 years old, and there's a bunch of 4-year-olds there, and he's smacking them around, hurting them, hitting them with sticks, doing things. Do you just say, "Well, I won't interfere"? No, you go over and you stop that behavior, even if it takes force. You make the 12-year-old stop hurting the younger children. Okay, that's an obvious thing to do. So it may require force. You may have to restrain the older child or find his parents somewhere or do something to fix that situation. But just saying, well, that's life. Sometimes it's violent and sometimes it's not. I guess those younger kids that are getting beat up will just have to adjust. That's not a good way of looking at it. That's a time where you intervene. So the question is, when do you intervene and when do you not intervene? When do you let it go and when not? Well, you are not the savior of the earth. You are not the angel of truth that comes down and whacks untruth with your great sword of fixing things. That's not who you are. You have to respect other people's free will. So if two people are arguing, it's not necessarily a good thing for you to butt in and try to tell them what the right answer is. That would probably get them both to join together to get rid of you. They'd stop their argument and join forces to push you away because you're interfering with something that's none of your business. So this is a slippery slope. This is something only to be done in those cases where it's obvious it's the right thing to do. And if you're not sure it's obvious that it's that obvious that it's the right thing to do, then leave it alone. Don't do it. Only do it in those cases where it's obvious it's the right thing to do. Okay. Now, she said that the last question was, well, if I do violent things to stop the people from doing violent things, have I actually helped any? Well, that depends. Let's say you do violent things and it works. You say, look, I made those gangs stop doing that in this situation. So I'm going to do more violent things, and I'm going to keep these people from doing that. I'm going to do that. And pretty soon you set yourself up as the arbiter of truth and justice and, the way things should be. Then you've become a monster. So it depends on you. Can you get physical and force some negative thing to stop and still be yourself? Can you still be the low entropy being? Can you still be the unassuming, humble person of peace? Can you be both of those? If that's the answer, then if the answer is yes, I can be both of those, then no, stopping something violent and destructive from happening by using violence to stop it will be okay, because you're not changing who you are. You're not becoming a violent person. You're maintaining yourself as a person that prefers nonviolence, but in this situation, you're certain that violence would be called for. Okay, so that's a different thing. So if it changes you and makes you a more violent person, because you see, oh look, that worked. Well, I could use that for other things then, since violence works. Now maybe I should start shaking down people and stealing their lunch money, because I realized I could get away with it. Well, now you've made a monster out of yourself. So it just depends. And I don't think there is a right answer that fits all cases. You're looking for a right answer that, okay, yeah, this is justified, but that's not. I think it depends on what's being done by who and what all the ramifications are. Let's say you're going to ride into this bunch of evildoers and get rid of them. Well, what are the ramifications of that? One ramification means that, oh, the evildoers are gone and there's not evil being done anymore. Or the ramification may be that for every one of those you got rid of, 10 more show up. Now you've just made your problem 10 times worse, you see. So what you did was not low entropy in the long run, maybe only low entropy for a day or two, and then it turned into even higher entropy. So you have to look at all the ramifications out into the future. And if you look at all those ramifications as best you can, you come up with a very strong sense that this is something you should engage in. Then you also have to look at the consequences. Okay, you're a doer of good, and you think that the thing to do is this particular bad person is just hurting everybody. Right? So then you stop that person. But there are laws about stopping people. So let's say you kill that person. Well, now you're a murderer. You will probably be tried and sent to prison for being a murderer. All right. Now, in your mind, you murdered for a good cause. You were getting rid of a bad person. In the eyes of the law, it doesn't matter why you murdered. It only matters that you did. And you go to prison. Okay. So there's lots of consequences what I'm saying. There's lots of consequences you have to think about.
I think
And
she
in the
may
long
be.
run, what is the lower entropy choice in the long run? So let's say you go to prison and you've got 5 children, and now they don't have anybody to take care of them, and now they grow up and be gangsters because that's the only way they can make a living. Have you really lowered the entropy, or maybe just put 5 more gangsters into the world?
Well, I
So
think you're speaking about offensive behavior. Offensive in the sense that you're the perpetrator of going after this, what you see as an injustice. But there is such a thing as defense of others, self-defense,
yes,
and
and
defense of others.
self-defense. Yes,
If
there is.
those laws apply in wherever this area is, there is defense of others. If you see someone, it's still homicide.
I'm Tom Campbell. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're enjoying the content. If you do like our content, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions just for the Patreon members. And most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.
So it's a very, very tricky situation.
Yes.
She doesn't seem to be very concerned about getting killed because she says, well, if that happened, she feels so strongly. If I tried to defend someone and I got killed, well, I'll be back. You know, it's
But
not,
yeah, it's
and
not
that
that
must be
simple. And
very, you know,
I hadn't gotten to the defensive part yet. I
okay,
was still working on the kind of the offensive part where
of
you go in
course.
and take part. There's lots of things you don't know. If the fact, like Donna just mentioned, that let's say you go in to try to get rid of the bad guys, but it doesn't work. They find you out and they kill you and maybe your family and so on. Well, what have you done? Has that been a low entropy or a high entropy choice? You see? So your intention may have been a good one, but it's ill thought out and it's hard to understand what the future may bring. It's hard to understand what could happen, how the possibilities might change. So it's really risky business thinking that your violence is going to end up low entropy because there's so many things that could happen that could turn it into a high entropy thing. It's a very difficult. So only those special situations where it is obviously clear should you take that violent approach. It's a very rare situation. Typically, if there's lots of high entropy among lots of people, particularly if it involves governments and that sort of thing, an act of any one person isn't going to make that much difference. You got to change the minds of the people to actually make a long-term difference. So then we have the other case, which is purely defensive. If you're going to defend yourself or defend others, then you can do that to the best that you're available, unless it's going to cause even more trouble. If your defense is going to cause the offense to double its size and create even more trouble, then it was not well planned, you see. And how do you know that won't happen? Well, you don't. You have to really assess all the possibilities. And then when you realize that, well, I can't assess all the probabilities, there's a whole lot of things that could happen that I can't even imagine, then the answer is probably no. You don't go either defend yourself or go get rid of that bad guy because you just don't know all the connections that could happen. Now, what you can do, perhaps, is plan a plan something that would help destabilize that bad guy or would work against where he is. You can do that, but then that doesn't have to be violent. That can be done from a nonviolent position. You can not cooperate with their orders that the bad guys give orders. You can just non-cooperate if that creates a better outcome, but that could create a worse outcome too. So just because you have good intentions doesn't mean it won't create a worse outcome. And understanding all the ways that could possibly play out is mostly impossible. Too many different ways it could play out, too many ways it could turn a corner. And though you wanted to help, all you do is enrage the beast and make the beast meaner. It didn't really help much at all. Matter of fact, made things worse. So, except those special cases where it's obvious, I'd say the violence is not a good answer. In those
Thank you,
special
Tom.
cases where it is obvious, got to think long and hard about all the consequences.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Thank you, Tom.